Wyoming Territory, 1879. The wind howled across the plains like a lonesome coyote, whipping dust into tiny funnels that danced between the wagons of the Clearwater outfit. Beneath a sky that threatened rain, 24-year-old Beau Jameson tightened the cinch on his saddle and squinted at the darkening horizon. 3 years as a hired gun for cattle drives had taught him one immutable truth. Sentiment got men killed in the West. Love was a luxury for those with solid walls and city comforts, not for men who slept under stars and carried their lives on horseback. The trail was for survival, nothing more. "Staring won't change the weather, Jameson," called Clancy, the trail boss. "We're making camp at Cottonwood Creek tonight, storm or no storm." Beau nodded, swinging onto his dun gelding with practiced ease. His lean frame moved with the horse as one, shoulders squared beneath his worn leather vest. The young cowboy's face, though weathered by sun and wind, still bore the handsome features his mother once said would be his undoing. But Beau had learned early that good looks meant nothing when leads started flying or when winter stretched provisions thin. Only skill and caution kept a man breathing out here. "New homesteaders settled up ahead," Clancy added, spitting tobacco juice into the dust. "I want no trouble from any of you boys." Beau tugged his hat lower. Homesteaders meant fences, and fences meant the end of the open range he'd come to depend on. More importantly, homesteaders meant families with bright-eyed daughters who looked at cowboys like they were something special instead of just drifters bound to disappoint. He'd sworn off such entanglements after Sarah Wilkins had waited 6 months for his return, only to marry the shopkeeper's son while Beau was pushing cattle through Colorado. "I'll keep to myself," Beau said, spurring his horse toward the head of the herd. The storm broke just as they reached Cottonwood Creek, a shallow ribbon of water lined with the trees that gave it its name. Rain pelted down as the men worked to establish camp, cursing the mud that sucked at their boots. Through sheets of water, Beau spotted a small cabin nestled against the treeline, smoke curling defiantly from its stone chimney. "Anderson's," Clancy explained, following Beau's gaze. "Husband, wife, daughter, good folks. He's given us permission to water the herd and camp on his south pasture." Beau nodded, focusing on securing the remuda horses rather than the golden light spilling from the cabin windows. He'd stay clear of any daughter, no matter how hospitable the family might be. The West was changing, but Beau Jameson wasn't, couldn't afford to. Morning brought clear skies and an unwelcome surprise. Clancy approached as Beau stirred the breakfast fire. "Anderson's youngest broke her leg yesterday. His wife sent over fresh bread, but the girl needs medicine from town. I need someone to ride to Laramie and back." Clancy paused. "You're the best rider we've got, Jameson." Beau's jaw tightened. "Send Peterson." "Peterson couldn't find his way back if the town was on fire. It's you or nobody." Clancy's tone left no room for argument. "Considerate goodwill for letting us use their land." An hour later, Beau found himself dismounting at the Anderson homestead, a list of medicines tucked in his shirt pocket and a knot of reluctance in his stomach. He rapped sharply on the door, stepping back when it swung open. She wasn't what he expected. 22-year-old Madeline Anderson stood framed in the doorway, her calico dress dust-free and neat despite the early hour. Wheat blonde hair was pinned back from a face that seemed too fine-featured for frontier life, yet her clear blue eyes held the steady resolve of someone who had faced Western hardships and remained standing. "Mr. Jameson?" she asked, her voice surprisingly melodious. "Father said you'd be coming." Beau removed his hat, suddenly conscious of the trail dirt on his clothes. "Ma'am, I understand your sister needs medicine." A small smile softened her expression. "My sister is 8 years old and quite dramatic about her injury. Please come in. Father has drawn a map to the doctor's office." Inside, the cabin was modest but meticulously kept. A rag rug brightened plank floors and curtains made from flour sacks framed the windows. It was the kind of home that spoke of permanence, the very thing Beau avoided. Mr. Anderson, a weathered man with kind eyes, provided detailed directions while his wife wrapped the promised bread in a clean cloth. Their hospitality was genuine, making Beau increasingly uncomfortable. He didn't want their kindness or their daughter's curious glances. Attachment to anything or anyone was a weakness he couldn't afford. "I'll be back by sundown," he promised, retreating to his horse. Madeline followed him outside. "Thank you, Mr. Jameson. Lisa's in considerable pain." Beau mounted up, looking down at her. sunlight caught in her hair, turning it to gold. "Just doing what's asked of me, Miss Anderson." "Maddie," she corrected. "Everyone calls me Maddie." "I'm not everyone," he replied, immediately regretting the curtness in his tone. She didn't flinch. Instead, her smile widened slightly. "No, Mr. Jameson. I don't believe you are." As he rode away, Beau silently cursed Clancy, the storm, the broken leg, and most of all, the way Madeline Anderson's eyes seemed to see straight through his carefully constructed walls. The sooner he delivered the medicine and returned to the herd, the better. Laramie was bustling with activity when Beau arrived. He located the doctor quickly, obtained the required medicines, and was preparing to leave when gunshots erupted from the saloon. Instinctively, he flattened against a building, hand hovering near his Colt. 3 men staggered out, clearly deep in their cups despite the early hour. "Herd Clearwater's pushing a herd through," one slurred. "Means payday for some lucky girls at Miss Pearl's." Beau remained still, recognizing the speaker as Frank Duval, a notorious troublemaker with a grudge against Clancy. If Duval knew their location, it could mean trouble. After the men passed, Beau changed course to the telegraph office and sent a warning to the nearest relay station to Cottonwood Creek. The delay meant he wouldn't reach the Anderson place until after dark. As he rode, Beau considered the implications of Duval's presence. The man was known for rustling and had nearly cost Clancy his reputation last season when cattle disappeared under Beau's watch. The memory still stung. It had been his first big responsibility, and the failure had reinforced his belief that depending on others only led to disappointment. Night had fallen completely when Beau finally approached the Anderson homestead. A single lamp burned in the window, casting a warm rectangle onto the packed earth of the yard. He dismounted stiffly, his body protesting the long ride. The door opened before he could knock. Madeline stood there, relief washing over her features. "We were worried," she said simply. "Ran into some trouble in town, nothing serious." Beau handed over the package of medicines. "How's your sister?" "Sleeping now, please come in." "Father's checking the livestock, but Mother left stew warming." Beau hesitated. Every instinct told him to decline, to deliver the medicines and return to camp. But exhaustion weighed on him, and the promise of a hot meal was too tempting after a day in the saddle. "Just for a few minutes," he conceded. The stew was hearty, filled with vegetables Beau recognized from the small garden plot he'd noticed earlier. Madeline sat across from him, sipping tea while he ate. The silence between them was surprisingly comfortable. "You don't talk much, do you, Mr. Jameson?" she finally asked. "Beau," he corrected, surprising himself, "and no, not usually." 3 years with hardly a word," she said with a hint of amusement. "That's what Father said about you." Beau looked up sharply. "Your father knows me. He remembers you from previous drives, says you're the quiet one who watches everything but says nothing." She tilted her head slightly. "He also says you're the best horseman he's ever seen, and that you once rode 15 miles with a bullet in your arm to warn a settlement about raiders." Heat crept up Beau's neck. "Your father exaggerates." "Does he?" Her blue eyes held as steadily. "I don't think so. I think you're exactly who he says you are, a man who believes the West has no place for anything but survival, so you've closed yourself off to everything else." The accuracy of her assessment knocked the wind from him more effectively than any bronco. Beau set down his spoon, suddenly defensive. "With respect, Miss Anderson, you know nothing about me." "Maddie," she corrected again, unfazed by his tone. "And perhaps I don't, but I know what it looks like when someone's running from something. I saw it in my own mirror for years after we left Chicago." Before Beau could respond, the door opened, and Mr. Anderson entered, stamping mud from his boots. The moment between them broke, and Beau seized the opportunity to thank them both and make his escape. As he mounted up, Madeline appeared at his side one last time. "The cattle drive passes through every season," she said, looking up at him. "Maybe next time you could stay for pie." Beau tugged his hat brim in acknowledgement and rode away, telling himself the tightness in his chest was just fatigue, nothing more. The camp was quiet when he returned, most of the men already rolled in their blankets. Clancy sat by the fire, pipe smoke curling around his grizzled features. "Message got through," the trail boss said by way of greeting. "We're moving out at first light, pushing the herd north faster than planned." "Duval?" Beau asked. Clancy nodded. "And his boys, word is they're looking for easy pickings." Good work spotting them. Beau should have felt satisfaction at the praise, but all he could think about was that accelerating their pace meant they'd be leaving Cottonwood Creek and the Andersons behind sooner than expected. The realization bothered him more than it should have. Get some sleep, Clancy advised. Tomorrow will be hard riding. But sleep eluded Beau that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw wheat blonde hair and steady blue eyes that seemed to read the truth he kept hidden even from himself. Morning brought organized chaos as the outfit prepared to move out. Beau was checking his saddle when he spotted a familiar figure approaching on horseback. Madeline Anderson rode with confidence, her hair braided and pinned beneath a practical hat, a basket secured to her saddle. "Miss Anderson," Clancy greeted her, "what brings you out so early?" "Mother sent provisions," she replied, dismounting gracefully. "And Father asked me to tell you there's a faster route north through our west pasture. It'll save you half a day's ride and keep you off the main trail where unfriendly eyes might be watching." Clancy's eyebrows rose. "That's mighty generous." "Just neighborly," she said, her gaze finding Beau across the camp. "Besides, we know which outfits treat the land with respect." As the men gratefully accepted the Andersons' offer and the fresh biscuits Madeline had brought, Beau kept his distance. But when she approached him directly, he couldn't avoid her without causing a scene. "Your sister feeling better?" he asked stiffly. "Much thanks to you." Madeline's smile was genuine. "Father asked me to guide you through our property. The creek forks, and taking the wrong branch could lead you into Box Canyon country." Beau looked to Clancy, hoping for reprieve, but the trail boss was already nodding in agreement. "Ride point with Miss Anderson," he instructed. "We'll follow with the herd." And so Beau found himself alone with Madeline, riding ahead of the outfit. She was a natural horsewoman, handling her sturdy bay mare with minimal guidance. The silence between them stretched until she finally broke it. "You're angry about having to ride with me," she observed. "No, ma'am." "You're certainly not pleased." Beau sighed. "It's not you. I prefer to keep to myself." "Because getting close to people is dangerous," she supplied. He shot her a look. "You make it sound foolish." "Not foolish, sad," her expression softened. "The West can be harsh, but that doesn't mean we should face it alone. That's why people build communities, homesteads, families." "And how's that working for you?" The question came out more sharply than he intended. "Stuck out here miles from anywhere, trying to coax crops from unforgiving soil." To his surprise, she laughed. "Quite well, actually. We have good water, decent grazing, and neighbors who watch out for each other. Even the occasional surly cowboy who rides 15 miles to fetch medicine." Beau felt his defenses weakening against his will. There was something about Madeline Anderson that made his carefully constructed isolation seem suddenly hollow. "I lost someone," he found himself saying. "In a raid 3 years ago, settlement in Colorado. I was supposed to be there, but I took an extra job that kept me away. By the time I got back," he trailed off, shocked at his own disclosure. Madeline's expression held no pity, only understanding. "My fiancé died of fever 2 weeks before our wedding. That's why we left Chicago. My parents thought a fresh start would help me heal." "Did it?" "Not at first. But eventually I realized that closing myself off was a way of staying in that grief, of punishing myself for surviving." She looked at him directly. "Sound familiar?" Before Beau could respond, a shot rang out, the report echoing across the open ground. His reaction was instantaneous. He grabbed Madeline's reins, pulling both their horses behind a rocky outcropping as 2 more shots followed. "Duval," he said grimly, drawing his revolver. "Stay down." "Our ranch hands," Madeline began, her voice steady despite the danger. "They're working the north field if we can signal them." Another volley of shots cut her off. Beau counted at least 3 shooters positioned in the rocks ahead. They were pinned down with the herd and the rest of the outfit still too far back to help. "When I fire, ride hard back to your father's house," Beau instructed. "Get help? And leave you alone against 3 gunmen? I think not." To his astonishment, Madeline reached into her saddle bag and withdrew a small derringer. "Father insists I carry this. I'm quite accurate with it, though the range is limited." Beau stared at her, reassessing everything he thought he knew about Madeline Anderson. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" A faint smile touched her lips. "You have no idea." Together, they formulated a plan. Madeline would create a diversion by firing at the leftmost shooter, while Beau would use the distraction to target the other two. On her count of 3, they executed the strategy with precision that spoke of her unexpected coolness under fire. The first man went down with Beau's bullet in his shoulder. The second scrambled for better cover as Madeline's shot kicked up dirt near his position. The third, whom Beau recognized as Duval himself, returned fire wildly. "We need to move," Beau said, noticing their position becoming increasingly exposed. "That boulder to the right, can you make it?" Madeline nodded, gathering her reins. They broke cover simultaneously, bullets whizzing past as they galloped to the new position. As they reached safety, Beau heard the welcome sound of pounding hooves, the Clearwater outfit coming to their aid, having heard the gunfire. Within minutes, the situation had reversed. Duval and his remaining man found themselves outgunned and surrounded. They surrendered with curses and threats, but the danger had passed. As Clancy's men bound the would-be rustlers, Beau turned to Madeline, suddenly aware of how close they were huddled together behind the boulder. A smudge of dirt marked her cheek, and a strand of blonde hair had escaped her braid during their dash to safety. Without thinking, he reached out to brush it back. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rougher than intended. "No." Her eyes met his, something unspoken passing between them. "Are you?" "No thanks to you and that Derringer," he replied, a reluctant smile tugging at his mouth. "Where did a proper young lady learn to shoot like that?" "Chicago wasn't always proper," she said with a hint of mischief. "And neither am I." The moment lingered, charged with possibilities that Beau had denied himself for years. Then Clancy was there, breaking the spell with questions and congratulations on their quick thinking. The incident changed something fundamental between them. As the outfit regrouped and prepared to continue the drive, now with prisoners to deliver to the nearest lawman, Beau found himself volunteering to escort Madeline home. "I can find my own way," she protested, though her eyes suggested she wasn't entirely opposed to his company. "I insist," he replied. "After what just happened, it wouldn't be right to let you ride alone." The journey back to the Anderson homestead took longer than necessary, their pace deliberately slow. Beau found himself talking more than he had in years, sharing stories of cattle drives and the changing West. Madeline listened attentively, offering insights and experiences of her own that revealed a sharp mind and observant nature. "Will you come back?" she asked as they approached her home. "After the drive is finished." The question caught him off guard. The logical answer, the safe answer, was no. He had the next drive already lined up and the one after that. His life was on the trail, moving always, attached to nothing and no one. But looking at Madeline Anderson, with her quiet strength and unexpected courage, Beau suddenly found himself questioning the foundations of his existence. "I don't know," he answered honestly. She nodded, accepting his uncertainty without judgment. "Well, if you do, that offer of pie stands. Mother makes the best apple pie in 3 territories." As he rode back to rejoin the outfit, Beau felt as though the world had shifted beneath him. For the first time in 3 years, he was thinking beyond the next drive, the next paycheck, the next sunrise. He was thinking about wheat-blonde hair and blue eyes that saw through his carefully constructed armor. The drive continued north, the days blending into a rhythm of dust and distance. But Beau Jameson was no longer the same man who had started the journey. Each night by the campfire, he found himself wondering what Madeline was doing, whether she thought of him, whether her offer had been mere politeness or something more. 2 weeks later, they delivered the cattle to their destination, and Clancy paid out the men's wages. Traditionally, this was when Beau would sign on for the next drive, continuing the endless cycle of movement that had defined his life since Colorado. Instead, he found himself hesitating. "Something on your mind, boy?" Clancy asked, noting his reticence. "Thinking about taking some time," Beau admitted. "Maybe heading back south for a spell." The trail boss studied him with knowing eyes. "Would this have anything to do with a certain young lady who shoots like she was born with a gun in her hand?" Beau's silence was answer enough. "About time," Clancy said gruffly. "Job will be waiting when you're ready." "If you're ever ready." That evening, Beau found himself riding south, uncertainty and hope warring in his chest. What awaited him at Cottonwood Creek? What did he even want to happen? The questions chased each other through his mind as the miles passed beneath his horse's hooves. It was late afternoon, 3 days later, when he crested the rise overlooking the Anderson homestead. The familiar sight of the cabin nestled against the trees, smoke rising peacefully from the chimney, caused an unexpected tightness in his throat. He had no right to the feeling of homecoming that swept through him, yet there it was. As he approached, a figure emerged from the garden plot, Madeline, her skirts gathered in one hand as she balanced a basket of vegetables in the other. She spotted him, freezing momentarily before setting down her harvest and walking to meet him. "Mr. Jameson," she greeted, her voice carefully neutral though her eyes betrayed her surprise. The drive finished early. Beau dismounted, suddenly uncertain. "No, it's done. And yet you're here instead of heading to the next one." "I heard there was pie," he said, attempting a lightness he didn't feel. Her smile bloomed slowly, transforming her face. There might be, if a certain cowboy was interested in staying for supper. "I was thinking," Beau said carefully, "that I might stay a bit longer than that. If there was work to be found." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "Father was just saying yesterday that we need an experienced hand for the fall roundup of our small herd. Someone who knows horses and cattle. Sounds like something I might be qualified for." "I believe you might be," she agreed, her tone light but her gaze serious. "Though I should warn you we take meals together here, there would be conversation expected, perhaps even laughter." "I think I could manage that," Beau said, the corner of his mouth lifting in what felt like his first genuine smile in years. Madeline regarded him thoughtfully. "What changed your mind, Beau Jameson? What brought you back to a place you were so determined to ride away from?" The truth rose to his lips before he could consider its wisdom. "You did. The way you faced down Duval without flinching. The way you build a life here instead of just surviving it. It made me wonder if I've been wrong all this time." "About what?" "About the West having no place for anything but survival." He gestured to the homestead, the carefully tended garden, the evidence of permanence and care. "About connections being weakness instead of strength." Madeline stepped closer, close enough that he could see flecks of gray in her blue eyes. "And what have you decided?" "That I'd like to find out," he said simply. "If you'll let me." Her hand reached for his, tentative but determined. "I think that could be arranged." As the season turned, Beau Jameson found himself doing something he'd never imagined, putting down roots. The small room the Andersons offered him in their barn became more of a home than any place he'd known since Colorado. He worked from sunrise to sunset, helping with the fall harvest, repairing fences, and breaking the spirited colt mister. Anderson had been saving for someone with Beau's touch, but it was the evenings that truly transformed him. Nights spent at the Andersons' table, where conversation flowed as freely as coffee and Madeline's laughter became a sound he craved more than silence. Weekends at the local gatherings, where he gradually lost his reputation as the quiet drifter and became known instead as the capable young man courting Madeline Anderson. Courting. The word still startled him when he allowed himself to acknowledge what was happening between them. Their relationship evolved with the deliberate pace of frontier propriety, shared glances over dinner, chaperoned walks after church, careful conversations about futures and possibilities. Winter came early that year, bitter and unforgiving. The Anderson home became an island in a sea of white, the family and Beau drawn closer by necessity and inclination. On the longest nights, when wind howled around the eaves, they gathered by the fire to read aloud or simply talk. It was on such a night, with snow piling against the windows and the rest of the family retired early, that Beau and Madeline found themselves alone by the hearth. A proper distance separated them on the settee, but the intimacy of the moment, of shared warmth while winter raged outside, created a closeness that transcended physical space. "Tell me about her," Madeline said softly, breaking a comfortable silence. "The one you lost in Colorado." Beau stiffened momentarily, then relaxed as he realized the pain of Sarah's memory had dulled to an ache rather than the sharp grief it once was. "Her name was Sarah Wilkins. We grew up together in Missouri, came west with her family when I was 19. He stared into the flames. "She believed in me when no one else did. Thought I could make something of myself out here." "She was right," Madeline observed gently. "Maybe, but I wasn't there when the raiders came. I took an extra job driving cattle to Denver, thinking the money would help us start our own place." His voice roughened. "By the time I got back, the settlement was ashes. She was gone, along with her whole family. Madeline's hand found his in the firelight. "It wasn't your fault, Beau. I know that now." He turned to face her. "I've spent 3 years punishing myself for surviving, for not being there, running from place to place, never letting anyone close enough to matter. And now I'm terrified," he admitted, the confession raw and honest. "Terrified that I've forgotten how to stay in one place, that I don't know how to build something lasting instead of just passing through." Madeline leaned closer, her face illuminated by the dancing flames. "I think you know more than you give yourself credit for. I've seen how you fixed the west fence to withstand the spring floods. How you check on Lisa every morning even though her leg healed months ago. How you remember exactly how everyone takes their coffee." Her words warmed him more than the fire. "Those are small things." "Those are the only things that matter," she countered. "Life isn't built on grand gestures, Beau. It's built on small kindnesses repeated daily, on showing up, on being present." As she spoke, Madeline leaned into him, her shoulder touching his, her face tilted up with an expression of such open affection that it stole his breath. The firelight cast her in gold, transforming the familiar setting into something almost dreamlike. "I love you," she whispered, then immediately drew back, eyes wide with shock at her own admission. I didn't mean to say that." "Not yet," her cheeks flushed crimson. "It's too soon, I know it's too soon." The world seemed to stop in that moment, suspended between heartbeats. For 3 years, Beau Jameson had armored himself against precisely this vulnerability, convinced that the frontier left no room for such sentiment. Yet here it was, offered freely in the glow of a winter fire by a woman whose courage continually humbled him. "It's not too soon," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Not when it's true." Hope brightened her features. "Beau, I love you too," he continued, the words unfamiliar but right. "I think I started falling the moment you pulled that derringer and refused to run. No one's ever stood their ground with me like that. No one's ever seen through me the way you do." Her smile was radiant. "Does this mean you're staying, not just for the winter?" In answer, Beau reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object that caught the firelight. A simple gold band, purchased in secrecy during his last trip to Laramie for supplies. "If you'll have me," he said, suddenly nervous. "I know I don't have much to offer yet, but I've been talking with your father about the north section of his land. With my savings and what I earned by spring, I could build us a proper place. Nothing fancy at first, but—" Madeline silenced him with a finger to his lips. "Yes," she said simply, "yes to all of it." The kiss that followed was gentle, a promise exchanged in the warmth of the fire while winter howled its futile protests outside. When they finally parted, Beau saw in her eyes the future he'd been running from and toward all at once. Spring came to Wyoming with its usual tumult of mud and renewal. The land awakened, and with it, the promise Beau had made beside the winter fire. True to his word, he began construction on a small but sturdy cabin on the northern edge of Anderson land, close enough for family but independent enough for a new beginning. Word spread quickly through the scattered community. Neighbors appeared with tools and supplies, transforming what should have been months of solitary labor into weeks of shared effort. Beau, who had spent years avoiding connection, found himself at the center of a barn-raising tradition that predated the territory itself. "Told you connections were strength, not weakness," Madeline teased as they watched the roof beams go up under the direction of her father and 3 neighboring ranchers. The wedding took place in June, beneath an arch of wildflowers Madeline and her mother had gathered from the surrounding hills. Beau stood waiting in a new suit, watching his bride approach in a dress of creamy satin that had once belonged to her grandmother. Her wheat-blonde hair was crowned with bluebells, and her smile outshone the summer sun. As they spoke their vows before the traveling preacher and assembled friends, Beau marveled at the journey that had brought him here. From lonely drifter to man with roots, from believing the West had no place for love to creating that very place with his own hands. Later, as they danced under stars to fiddle music provided by neighboring homesteaders, Madeline leaned her head against his chest. "Happy?" he asked, still sometimes disbelieving his good fortune. "Completely," she murmured, "though I do have one regret." He pulled back slightly to see her face. "What's that?" Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "That I whispered, 'I love you,' so soon that night by the fire. I had planned a much more dignified declaration after a proper courtship of at least 6 months. Beau laughed, drawing her closer as they swayed to the music. If you'd waited, we might still be circling each other like cautious hawks. True, she conceded. Sometimes the words that slip out unplanned are the most honest ones. As twilight deepened into night and the celebration continued around them, Beau Jameson looked at the home he'd built, the woman in his arms, and the community that had welcomed him despite his initial reluctance. The West wasn't just a place of survival after all. It was a place where life, in all its fullness, waited for those brave enough to risk their hearts. And as he and Madeline slipped away from the celebration toward their new home, Beau knew with absolute certainty that the words whispered by firelight had changed everything. Not just for him, but for generations to come, children and grandchildren who would grow up on this land, hearing the story of a drifting cowboy and the woman whose unplanned confession had finally brought him home.